Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Next Generation Sports Talk. I'm your host, Roman Bostic, and today we are here with the one, the only, Mr. Erik Moses. Tell me, Mr. Moses, how you been?
I've been great. I've been looking forward to this interview.
Likewise here. Been a great day. Well, an exhausting day, but still wonderful day if I get to interview nonetheless. So we're going to break down into 10 simple questions here. Try to, get to know a little bit more about you and to teach others maybe how to be someone like you. So first off, what circumstances led you to become the president of the Nashville Superspeedway?
Well, I have been involved in the sports industry for the better part of 12 years. I was the sports commissioner in Washington, D.C. for about 11 years. And then, as you know, I was the president of the D.C. Defenders in the XFL Professional Football League for a year before becoming the president of the Nashville Superspeedway. I was fortunate enough that my now boss from Dover Motorsports that owns our track and I were friends. And when they decided to bring this track back after being closed for 10 years, they were looking for someone to lead that effort. And he asked me would I be interested. And after a couple of weeks of talking about it and me learning more about NASCAR and him learning more about me and my career and what I had done, we decided that it was a great fit.
All right. Now tell me, how did you feel when you received that phone call saying that you were going to be moving?
I was surprised that I was getting the phone call because I had no previous experience in NASCAR. I had run sports entertainment venues before, and I'd obviously run a professional football team before, but I had no NASCAR experience. And so I was excited to get the call. I was a little curious. I didn't know whether or not I was interested in the opportunity or not, but I certainly knew I wanted to learn more about it.
All right. And on that topic, I know a lot of us might not know a lot about NASCAR ourselves. So what do you think it exactly means to be president of the Nashville Superspeedway? For example, what do you do on a day-to-day basis with your job?
That's a great question. So technically my job is as a promoter. And what that means is that, we run a venue that we own, the Nashville Superspeedway. NASCAR, which is like the NFL or Major League Baseball or NBA, they set up the competition. They are what is called the sanctioning body or the governing body for the sport. So they determine the rules and who are the competitors and all of those things. But NASCAR is a circuit. And what that means is that the competition goes from one place to the next, to the next, to the next each week. It's not like with a team, say in the XFL, where we had a certain number of home games and a certain number of away games. We are a venue that hosts this event right now once a year. And so the competition moves from city to city to city. And so, my job really is to make certain for our NASCAR weekend that we sell the tickets to the fans, we sell parking, we sell the sponsorship to our corporate partners, we sell the hot dogs and the popcorn and the beer, and we make certain that we do the marketing and we talk to the news media and ensure that everybody knows that NASCAR is coming to Nashville every year that we have this.
I am going to ask you a quick question there. Out of all of those things to do, which one would you say is the hardest? Getting prepared for the incoming race or having to market the incoming race?
That's a good question. I think it's the preparation, because what I learned a couple of weeks ago when we had our first NASCAR weekend is the scale of what we're doing is so large. So we had a truck race on Friday night, an Xfinity car race on Saturday afternoon, and a Cup Series race on Sunday afternoon. So that's 3 days of large scale events. And it's like planning for something like the Super Bowl or the Final Four because of the scale of it and because you have to do it 3 times in a row. And so I think the preparation for that, making certain that the venue is there, that the grass and infield is painted with all the logos, that everything in the venue looks good, that the seating is okay, that the concessions are ready, your bathrooms are clean, that everything is working the way it's supposed to, or your catering and your suites is right. All of that stuff takes a lot. Ensuring your landscaping looks good, all the banners are hung. All of that takes a lot of energy and a lot of resources from a lot of people. And so I think that's the hardest. The marketing part is not quite as hard because NASCAR is fortunate to have some really great fans and a really strong fan base. And we know how to appeal to them. Sometimes it can be a little harder as we're looking to expand that fan base and finding new potential fans to appeal to and to educate about our sport so that they get interested in coming out and attending a race.
All right. Now, that does sound a lot different from what you did in DC. So can you tell us, what do you think the big difference is from being president of the DC Defenders and president of the Nashville Superspeedway?
Well, with the Defenders, I was running a team. And so, as I said earlier, our team had a certain number of home games in the same building where we played. And so we knew what to expect in our home stadium. We had players that we would market. We had a coach that we could market. And we, in some ways, were marketing the league and the competition between us and another team this week or next week. With NASCAR, we essentially own the building and are promoting the race and the event that happens, the races that happen in the building, but we own the building and we don't control the drivers or the teams or any of that kind of stuff. And so it's a little bit of a different thing to do. So once the NASCAR race is over, my job shifts from promoting the NASCAR races to attracting other events that people want to come to, whether they're concerts or festivals or football games or soccer tournaments or whatever that might be, and figuring out how to market those things and how to sell tickets to those things and how to get media coverage like this podcast of those kinds of events.
All right. Now I am going to have to ask you, which one do you think was harder, running a big team and having to market that, or having to market a building itself, a stadium, a place?
I think it's harder. I think what I'm doing now is harder because if you think about it, people don't have to think about a building unless there's something happening there that they want to go to. Otherwise, there's no reason for them necessarily to think about your building in between events. So the challenge for us is, how do we stay top of mind? How do we make certain that Nashville Superspeedway isn't just something you think about once a year, but is a place that you think about and you hopefully feel favorable about all year round? Some of that is going to be by hosting various events. Other things are going to be by creating a brand that people recognize and that people feel strongly about because they've had good experiences at our building.
Now, I know that there are similar sports out there that are like NASCAR, where you do have to market a stadium. For example, Formula One. I know that when I first watched NASCAR, I was very confused on why it was laps. I thought, from what I'd seen, it was going to be a big course with a bunch of swift turns like Formula One. So could you explain to people out there what the difference is between those two?
So lots of differences between Formula One, which is called open wheel racing, because literally on the cars, the wheels are wide out in the open. Whereas in NASCAR, our cars are called stock cars. And so what stock means is that the Ford Mustang or the Chevy Camaro or the Toyota Camry that you see in a NASCAR race, those cars should look a lot like the cars that you could walk into any dealership and buy. And so it's stock. They're supposed to look like a car that you could actually drive yourself. You'd never see anything that looks like a Formula One car, or even an Indy car on the streets in any major city. The other differences are Formula One is much more of an international and a European sport, and its following is mostly European and international. NASCAR is born out of the American South and out of Southern culture, and it is primarily a fan base that is domestic and American, although there are international fans of NASCAR. So those are the biggest differences. Some of the other differences are in Formula One and even in IndyCar, a lot of the races will be road courses, which is kind of what you are describing, with lots of twisting turns and what have you, as opposed to being in a venue or on a track that's an oval like what we have, where you can sit in the stadium and see the entire race all at the same time. On a road course, if you're standing in one place, once the cars go by, you generally don't see them again unless you're watching television, because they may go 5 or 6 miles away from you on that road course. So that's more of in my mind, a made for television experience, whereas NASCAR is much more of a in-venue experience because you get to take in the entirety of the race while you're sitting in your seat.
So I know you did speak on those cars, and by the way, great answer. I know you spoke on those differences between the cars. So how well do you think the NASCAR cars would perform on, for instance, an Indy or Formula track, and vice versa? Do you think that there could actually be, I don't know, a NASCAR or and Formula One crossover of some sort? And how would that work?
So it wouldn't be a fair competition because the machines are very different. Indy cars and Formula One cars go a lot faster than NASCAR stock cars do. That said, what you have seen is some crossover with drivers. So Danica Patrick started off in IndyCar and moved over to NASCAR. More recently, you've had Jimmy Johnson, who just retired, who won the NASCAR Cup Series 7 times. He's one of the most decorated NASCAR drivers of all time. And now he's on the IndyCar circuit. And from what I've heard, having a tough time of it. When I've talked to people who know motorsports much better than I do, they say Formula One takes the most skill, then IndyCar, and then NASCAR. Very different. NASCAR, easier for, say, Lewis Hamilton to leave Formula One and come to IndyCar or to NASCAR than it would be for, say, a Jimmy Johnson or a Chase Elliott or a Bubba Wallace to go from NASCAR to IndyCar or Formula One.
All right. Now, I heard you say that NASCAR drivers specifically are great athletes. What makes you say that specifically?
Well, there are a couple things I think that NASCAR drivers, a couple characteristics that they have and things that they have to deal with that, in my mind, make them great athletes. One is physical stamina. These guys and women are in cars for 2, 3, 4 hours in very hot conditions with no air conditioning. And no ability to stop to go to the restroom. They lose 10 to 15 pounds of race and water weight. They have to stay very focused throughout that 2 to 4 hours worth of driving with 39 other cars around them, 6 or 8 inches away from them on all 4 sides. All they have is a rear view mirror in the top of the car, no side mirrors, and then they have a spotter who is someone with binoculars on top of a tower hundreds of yards away, telling them whether or not they can move to the left or move to the right, all while they're driving 150 plus miles an hour with 39 other cars who are driving that quickly all around them, knowing that if they bump into somebody at the wrong angle or too fast, it could cause a huge crash for them, for the other car, and for many other cars on the track. I think that requires quick reflexes, it requires focus, it requires stamina. All of these things are the kinds of things that are always associated with athleticism.
I mean, I totally agree with you. They have to have quick reflexes while driving in a car that if they slammed into a wall or lost control for even a second, boom, they would crash. Yep. And that would be something pretty bad. I completely agree with you. And speaking of crashes, I know that driving in NASCAR is pretty dangerous, but do you think that's why people like it?
I think that's part of the appeal. I think just like with combat sports or say boxing, I don't think fans don't necessarily want to see boxers get killed in the ring or get permanently injured, but they do like seeing people get knocked out or knocked down. It's the danger that appeals to people. That's why UFC and MMA has become so popular. It's the danger that someone could get hurt. Well, you have that same kind of thing in motorsports, where we know that if someone makes a mistake, if they lose that focus for just a minute, they could end up slamming into a wall, they could end up wrecking their car, ending their day, and possibly ending their life if they're not careful. And so those stakes are so high that I think it makes the competition even that much more important and thrilling, not only for the drivers and the teams, but also for the fans.
So that was a great answer. I definitely think that when there's just if there were a bunch of people going around a track really slowly, that probably wouldn't draw in as many fans. The appeal of NASCAR is how quickly these guys are moving and can make these high intensity moves. It's definitely a sport that to some might be confusing, but to the people who actually watch it and know a bit about it, it's definitely one that's very interesting. Now, I am going to ask a little bit of a different question. I'm going to hit you with a curveball here. The NASCAR has not been traditionally known as a sport with a lot of diversity. How do you feel now about breaking new ground?
Well, I have to say that, I thought the same thing before I got involved in the sport, that NASCAR was a sport that lacked diversity. I will tell you that since I've been involved in the sport for about the last year or so, sport is more diverse than people give it credit for. And that's usually because the people who have these ideas about it are those who have not really ever been to a race, ever really watched a race on television, and never really immersed themselves in the sport or its culture. So there are many more of us and people of color and women and others involved in this sport than most people think there are. Could there be more? Of course. Could our numbers be better? Absolutely. And the sport is doing a lot right now to try to broaden its appeal to new and different audiences. I personally am thrilled to be a part of that effort. While I didn't set out to be the first African-American track president in NASCAR history, I am certainly humbled by the fact that I am, and I take it as a personal challenge to make certain that I do the very best job I can to be as much of an inspiration as I can be to people like you and like my friend, the young man that I met in Charlotte at the NASCAR Hall of Fame named Harper Lucas, who wants to be an announcer in NASCAR and loves NASCAR, and other young people, Raja Karuth, who's a young African-American driver from Washington, D.C., and others who want to be involved in the sport. If they can take some inspiration from seeing me do this job and being the first one to do it, then it'll be worth the while for me.
So that actually is a perfect segue because, I feel like with all of the people that we see here, we have to really start to usher in the next generation, no pun intended there, of the sport, whether that is the athletes, the broadcasters, the CEOs, or the presidents like you. So tell me, with all your success, what advice could you give kids aspiring to be like you?
Do your research, be voracious with your reading and learning and feeding your curiosity about the things that you're interested in. If it's sports, then study that sport, and not just the players or the teams or what have you. Figure out how they work. The thing you have to realize if you want to work in sports and not just as an athlete or someone on the competition side is they're all businesses. So you have to understand how those businesses function. How do they make money? What do they spend money on? And how can you add value to those businesses? Look for mentors. Look for people who are involved in that sport in any way, shape, or form so that you can ask them questions. You can learn more about them. You can read about their careers and how they came to be. And hopefully you can find some mentors who will be able to help you get up that learning curve. And just look for opportunities to get involved. Volunteering and interning has always been a way for young people to get involved in all kinds of vocations, but sports in particular, because this is a business where it's built largely on relationships. You have to have technical capabilities and you have to be able to bring value to these businesses. But at the end of the day, because there's so many folks that want to work in sports and it's an employer's market, if you will, there are more people interested in working in this industry than there are jobs for them. Employers can be very selective. So what that ends up meaning is you have to know somebody and you have to be well known and have a good reputation and have some folks who are willing to give you a break.
Mm-hmm. Definitely true. Now we're going to move on here to the lightning round. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Try to answer them with 10 words or less, and we'll see how it goes. So first, Nashville or DC?
Love DC, but really enjoying Nashville.
Second question, out of all the NASCAR drivers you've seen, who do you think your favorite is?
My favorite of all time is Richard Petty. My current favorite is Bubba Wallace.
Ooh, good choice. Now, we're going to bring it away from NASCAR and bring it back to Nashville. What is your favorite Nashville food?
Nashville hot chicken.
Good choice. Good choice. And now we're going to swing it full circle. What's your favorite experience with a fan?
During our first NASCAR weekend, Father's Day weekend, a couple of weeks ago, I had some great experiences with lots of fans who came up to me and stopped me and thanked me for bringing back NASCAR to Nashville, who, were just so complimentary and obviously so appreciative of the effort that me and my team have put together in order to bring this track back and to bring the sport back. And people were just very kind. I got really nice letters and notes from people and gifts from some people who were just so excited to have NASCAR back in Nashville. And that warmed my heart, and it makes all the hard work that we put forward worthwhile to know that we can bring some happiness and some joy to people who really love this sport.
Well, you have definitely brought a lot of happiness and a lot of joy to everyone who has ever stepped foot into that stadium, Mr. Moses. Now, on that note, my name is Roman Bostic. This has been Next Generation Sports Talk. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Maybe get them interested in NASCAR yourself. But this has been Roman Bostic signing off. Peace out.